Hello, everyone. Brad Hairston here. Welcome to Transform Now. My guest today is Henry Cray, Head of Product at UP.Labs. Henry first caught my attention with some really interesting thought pieces that he put on social media. And as I learned more about his company and what they do, I was even more interested in getting him on the podcast. So welcome, Henry. Why don't you tell us more about yourself?
Absolutely, Brad. Thank you for having me. To kind of start from the beginning, my name is Henry. I live here in California, 7th generation Californian is what I like to tell people. So we go way back started my career really with startups. I've been doing startups pretty much my entire career. I love the idea of this early stage growth and various things. Right out of college, was working on early applications of natural language processing and AI, just looking at big data, doing a lot of analysis on written text, worked for a series of other startups, ranging in different industries until I really found what I like to call the deskless workforce, creating technology for people who weren't necessarily sitting behind a desk all day. A lot of operations, logistics, industrials, manufacturing, that kind of thing. I did a brief stint at Boston Consulting Group in their digital ventures practice, where we launched startups for a lot of different large corporations. It was an interesting model, worked in their industrial goods and energy practice. And now I'm at UP.Labs, where we're working on really, the moving world and the mobility sector with a lot of really cool enterprises.
That's awesome. And Henry, I saw that you were an economics major at UCLA. Did your passion for startups really start in college? Is that where you kind of got it into your blood and then it just carried on from there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two things that happened for me in college, one of which was just an econometrics class, because I loved the idea of big data and what it could do and how you can kind of see the macro and micro kind of touch points of what's going on. And I also was fortunate enough to join a startup in college. I was actually became a part-time student so I could work full-time at an e-commerce startup. But that was really what kickstarted everything that I liked about doing business with the smaller companies and seeing what kind of growth that we can drive.
Okay. Well, I definitely have done my homework on UP.Labs, and it really seems like a very different type of venture firm. I mean, there are plenty of them out there, building startups and so forth, but you guys seem to have a very unique approach to it, and especially the way you connect to these large, leading companies with well-known brands. But talk about the company, if you would, and just kind of, the role that you guys are playing in the AI ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would first kind of call us more of a venture lab. We are part of a venture capital ecosystem. We have Up Partners who, has the LPs and does big investments into a lot of different startups. And we're UP.Labs, where we're really partnering with very few, big enterprise corporations, Porsche, Alaska Airlines, JB Hunt, to name a few of them. And what we do is we essentially partner with them for 3 years. And we figured out essentially, what's going on with the kind of corporate venture capital ecosystem, right? You can either invest in companies and you don't have a lot of control in what you're invested in. You're hoping that they're going to be building a product or continue to be building things that kind of work strategically for you. You can have your own internal kind of incubation arms, which, talent sometimes is really hard to drive there. The incentives aren't necessarily aligned like they are with startups. And what we're trying to do is essentially align entrepreneurs and these big businesses to figure out, okay, what's a major problem for this big business, but what's also a major problem in the industry as a whole? And then how can we use AI to essentially create a startup where the big business owns a portion of that startup, but the startup is incentivized to not only solve that problem, but also really create an industry impactful company. And that's where kind of the thesis of UP.Labs started. So what we do is we essentially kind of do what we call problems we're solving. And we go deep into the organization and go all the way top down, from their C-level all the way down to individual contributors on the field, and figure out, okay, what are the biggest problems that are impacting and how big are these problems, right? And we put a dollar sign to, okay, this is a $10 million problem for this company. This is a $50 million problem. This is a $100 million problem. And we slowly kind of chip away at these various different problems. So, okay, this is a problem that we want to solve. It's a problem we're solving.
Right.
And then we start the ideation. We start the kind of the fun stuff, I like to call it, of really innovating and figuring out, okay, how can we use AI to solve this problem? And then verifying that other companies also have it. and then we create a startup about that. That takes about a year. We graduate that startup, generally raise around a $5 million seed for it, and then it's off the races, off in the wild to keep doing what they need to do.
And then you, I'm assuming, give the company that where you kind of took that idea and developed it, you're giving them a chance to invest in it. Is that the way it works?
Exactly. So let's just take Portia, for example, right? They own a portion of whatever we're building no matter what. And then we generally don't like to have them actually follow on investments later, because we like them to be in that, sweet spot of, minor ownership, but enough to, have a board seat or whatever they need to have to really still have control, but not to really envelop the company for a time. And then, fast forward a few years, they do have the option to acquire that company and bring it full time in-house.
Okay, got it. Well, clearly AI and more specifically agentic automation is pretty central to the startups that you're building. And you've written some really interesting things on social media expressing your point of view around agentic. So I want to spend some time just unpacking some of those things, because you made some really interesting points, and then that of course led me to you and your company, which I find equally interesting. But let's talk about one of your recent posts. You said that you believe what the Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said about SaaS being dead is not that off base, that the future really lies in agentic workflows. Could you just touch on that and kind of explain your point of view there?
Yeah, absolutely. So for one, I think even before agentic and AI and the big kind of gold rush that's been happening over the last 2 years, what we're seeing in the market is your basic CRUD software apps. You hit perfectly competitiveness in a way of any industry that you looked at, all the way, starting with your Salesforces of the world, where, sales technology and customer technology really, kicks off almost immediately for any type of software wave. And then you see your advertising technology, and then you start to see your basic, deskless workforce technology with the manufacturing, the ERPs, all of the acronyms of different management systems, if you will. And the wave of startups had kind of hit it, right? There was, almost every single industry had a leader that's a startup and also kind of an incumbent leader. And your G2 scores, your Gartner scores, et cetera, were kind of set. There wasn't a lot of room to say, oh, I'm going to go, digitize this workflow and create a new in 2026. Very few and far between. I think there's a few lucky ones that I've seen, like recycling software, right? And various other things that maybe there wasn't as much software involved and they were still a little bit on pen and paper. But for the most part, it was, that ship has sailed. And so I've been struggling myself, because I'd always been building software startups, of saying like, okay, SaaS seems like it's kind of dead. Like, where's going to be the next opportunities? And there's always little things that are coming up, but this wave of, okay, what's next, with the rise of AI and really the discounted price of tokens and various other things that made it actually very reliable to create AI-based solutions and agentic-based solutions started to really hit. And it's, okay, this is now the new opportunity, because if you think about it, like everybody's create, remove, update, deletes, or create, whatever. What's the R in CRUD? We're going to rewind that one. And so essentially, if you think about everybody's, CRUD application, most of the businesses are set. They have their database that is their system of record. Right. And so they're not really going to be switching from that. And maybe they are to just another one that already exists, but actual updates to those systems and actions that are being taken place in the system, well, that's a brand new workflow. Instead of having humans doing that, now there's an opportunity to automatically do that. And you saw that in the early days. I know you guys have been working on a lot of automation stuff for a while. And you have the Zapiers of the world and various other things where it's like very clear business logic that will allow these updates to happen. And you saw a big wave of integration play, right? The Plaid for X. I think that was the wave after SaaS, where it's like, okay, SaaS is here. Now, how are we going to get all the systems to talk to each other and allow them to update each other, right? Yeah. Based off of human inputted workflows. But now we're in a really interesting point where, the world moves and business moves on a lot of unstructured data. Whether it's emails, or it's PDFs, you could potentially call Excel somewhat unstructured, but the world really is still run on that. And that really hasn't changed in a very, very long time. There's a reason Excel is still probably the best piece of software that's ever come out of businesses. But what has changed is like a computer's ability to read, understand, and write unstructured data.
Yeah.
And so I think with the rise of LLMs and agentic workflows and various other things, there's this brand new opportunity, as probably a lot of people have seen and realize that new systems can now interact with SaaS. So SaaS is, I think, not necessarily dead in the sense that like all these SaaS companies are going away. I just think that they have kind of stapled themselves as, okay, we are the SaaS company. And now the next wave of startups and the next wave of companies is what's coming out. So instead of maybe SaaS is dead, it's more like the birth of SaaS is over, right? We're kind of at the tail end of new SaaS coming out. And now it's what can we build on top of these software solutions that will get in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely transforming into something different.
Yeah, exactly.
So Henry, one of the things I found very interesting in one of your posts was you emphasize this idea of an operator action interface. And you say that that's the most important thing companies, SaaS companies in particular, should be building right now. And that's for both proactive and reactive user interfaces. Why is this so critical in your opinion?
Yeah. So if you think about like what's one of the things that I like to say is like one of the most important things about software that you build is trust. If you don't have trust in the system, whether it's because it's slow, because there's bugs in it, because you don't understand, whatever it might be, if you don't have trust in the system, you're not going to have adoption. If you don't have adoption, then you're not going to get the benefits or the efficiency gains that the software is supposed to provide. And if you think about it, you know, it took a lot of people a long time and to really start to trust any type of software. And now we have this software that, you know, it's a black box, right? There's few people, probably a lot of listeners here, but few people who really understand like what LLMs actually do with tokens and kind of thinking about what's the next thing that's going to come out as it's kind of spewing out different information. And so trust is a really, really big thing. And before, you know, if we are taking a step back, if we think about like what agents are going to do and automated agents and agentic workflows, that's the idea that software, LLMs, or various different, you know, pieces of machine learning are going to see something, think something, and then do something, right? And so whatever they're going to do, how can a human actually trust them? And the only way for a human to trust that is for them to verify it. Trust but verify, right? And so in order for them to verify it, they need some kind of interface. And really, if you think about how most people use software today, there's kind of two options. One of which is proactive, meaning I see something happen and I'm proactive in adding it into the system and into the system of right. Maybe I need to schedule an appointment. So I'm proactively going to schedule the appointment. Maybe I'm creating a work order. I need to proactively go create that work order. And then there's reactive, right? I'm assigned to a work order and I need to complete that work order. So it's in my queue and I need to react to it and assign it or do something about it. And so if you think about what are agents going to do, right? They're going to be doing the exact same thing. They're going to see something and then they're going to create, right? Or they're going to be proactive with what they see. And then they're going to need to react to something. They're going to get assigned to something or they're going to have to kind of finish the job. And so for a human to be able to kind of interact and trust but verify these various different actions, the system, the software system, the SaaS system, whatever, needs to have an interface that allows humans to do this. And this is where I'm calling kind of that, you know, operator interface. And it's really human in the loop. It's human. Like when you talk about human in the loop, there's, you know, kind of two ways I think about it. I'm not, you know, nowhere near an AI expert, but this is just from a product lens, how I think about human in the loop, right? You have your kind of training set of human in the loop of, okay, the AI saying this, let's label that's correct and go on to the next one, the next one, and the next one. And the second one is, right, when their agent's actually acting on something, not in the training modules, but actually doing something, you need a human to say, yes, let's go complete this. And so all software, you have reactive and proactive, all agents are doing these types of works and you need some type of interface that allows the operator to verify whether that they need to modify what the agent's outputting. Hey, I created this appointment based off of this email, or I created this work order based off of this X, Y, or Z. Okay, that looks right. Or, oh no, that's not right. And, you know, modify it, confirm it, or reject it. And so I think every single company and every single SaaS company and every single interface needs to have something like this. And I haven't really been seeing it yet. You kind of see it, you know, here and there is some in various different places, but it is it's much more of a new paradigm. And I think a new UI and UX experience that hasn't hasn't really been coming out mainstream.
Yeah. What do you envision to be the ideal operator interface, knowing that operators are not prompt engineers? As you said, they need something that's easy to use, more intuitive. So what do you think it would look like as you look forward?
Yeah. So if you think about like most interfaces right now for LLMs and AI, and it's a chat interface, right? And I think that's like the baby step one, but I think it needs to be a lot more structured than that. And what I mean by that is if I'm just going onto an interface as an operator at my day-to-day work, it's like, where do I start? Well, I usually start with emails, right? And I have a list of emails, and I go into my emails and I say, okay, XYZ, or I have a list of work that's assigned to me and I need to go after that. Sure, I could ask the chat, okay, what is the work that's assigned to me, or what is this, what is that? And it could give me bullet points and all of that. But I don't think that is, is the ideal experience whatsoever.
Right.
And so what I really do think it is it's a mixture of two things. One of which is basically a queue. It's a new version of a queue that has, assigned, like any queue that you see in most systems. It's got who it's for, what the priority is, some information about it, any type of attachments or various things that kind of explain what's going on. But then when you kind of click into that queue, I think, as a user, thinking about like product terms, like user stories, as a user, I need to be able to see what the agent wants to do. I need to see why, the context around what the agent wants to do. I need to see all the supporting documents if I need to go deeper into it. And then I need the ability to confirm, modify, or reject what that agent wants to do. And I think, the future of a lot of software systems, in my opinion, is going to be very, very basic. From a UI perspective, at least in the short term, until there's full trust in AI and all of that. But there's no timeline on when that's actually going to be. And so they're going to have a queue of what they need to do. And then they're essentially going to just go one at a time, confirming, rejecting, or editing and modifying those various things.
Right. You've said that this operator interface is a stepping stone to headless AI. A lot of people talking about that agents will be headless before too long. What do you think that next phase looks like, and how will that fundamentally change, work once we get there?
Yeah, so I think the first step, right, is obviously the kind of reacting to what the agent wants to do and then confirming it. I think the next step is going to be reviewing it, right? So the agent, you can click on or whatever that might be, and then the agent's just going to start, once you trust it, agent's going to start doing that, and then you can start reviewing it. And then there has to be some kind of like, similar to how a manager might review work in some cases of, hey, show me what you did this week. You're still going to have a queue of all the things the agent did. You might have some kind of dashboard and various other things, but that's kind of the next step, right? And then the final step, hopefully, and I really don't know what a timeline on this is going to be, is that there's just not going to be task-driven work in the future because of this idea of headless AI, where AI is just sitting in the background, right? You don't really need a login to be reviewing those things. You're going to be maybe getting reports and overviews of various other things, but it allows you to start thinking much more strategically about your day-to-day job. And I think this is the big unlock, or one of the big unlocks for a lot of these kind of deskless workforce companies, is these people are really good at, strategically thinking about what's going to be the best thing for our network, what's going to be the best thing for our assets. But having to just point and click and do data entry and some of these simple tasks that AI hopefully will be taking care of to get them out of the firefighting of the day-to-day and much more into this strategic thinking and optimization that will, hopefully have that 1 + 1 = 3 thing that happens with AI.
Right. Interesting. Let's talk about the way that your company works with these large companies to assess the ROI on these agentic AI solutions that you're building for them in these startups. So looking at the 3 layers, like labor efficiency, net new revenue, and optimization, which of these 3 layers do you think enterprises are underestimating the most?
Yeah, it's a good question. And let's maybe I'll answer it, and then let's take a step back and just like, why is this such an important question, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about, especially with the type of companies that we work with, right? They've got their earnings, everything is a P&L statement. And I think the days of the workflow software that just gets pen out of paper and, oh, this will enable us to be more efficient, but we're not really able to track it on this per seat basis and various other things. I think that's over. And I think, that especially in today's economy and how people are thinking about expenses is like they're really looking at software now similar to what they're looking at, real life physical investments where, okay, we're going to buy this new machine and it's going to output 20x more capacity or whatever that might be. And I think people are starting to shift their look into software similar to that. And it's, not necessarily an expense directed to whatever it was before, but it's like, what is going to be the actual ROI on that? It's a difficult question to answer, especially in today's world, but it's very, very important. And so if you think about, okay, what are the types of ROI, right? As you just mentioned. So the easy one, which everyone's like, saying is like, oh, labor efficiency, right? We can reduce jobs. We can do X, Y, Z with agents. Agents can be in call centers now. They can be creating various different things and yada, yada. So I think that's a really important one. But it's not the most important one. And I'll tell you what it kind of unlocks in a second. So the second one you mentioned is net new revenue. I think this one's really, really interesting because if you think about it, there's a lot of tasks, especially for a big business, that's just not worth putting a human to, right? So take example, like unpaid invoices, right? To go track down a bunch of different people for 20 cents here, $5 here, or whatever, to have a $50,000 employee go do that and then return $30,000 because that's a full-time job, it's just not worth it. So that money is kind of sitting on the table. If you can employ agents to go do this is a job that wasn't being done before. And so if you can employ agents to do that, the ROI is like very, very straightforward and very easy. Another one to think about that's kind of similar is from a sales perspective. And I think this is why you look at most of the agentic softwares that have done really well to date. It's basically like, what is tied to revenue? And then how can we basically go capture revenue that we weren't capturing before? So we can have SDRs, sales reps, basically dial in for dollars. We could basically 1,000x that for a tenth of the price and get a big return on that before with humans, it just wasn't really, the ROI just didn't make sense. So I think that's really important. But the one I'm the most excited about, to go back to the labor efficiency side of things, is, AI and machine learning has been around for a very long time, longer than I've been in the workforce. And there's been a lot of work on it. And I think, simulations, network simulations, and various other things, you think about, digital twins and this type of thing where, okay, we have all of our physical assets on the computer, and that's been going on for a long time. And we can kind of track what's going on and do various things. And we can simulate and see, okay, what is the most efficient thing? But the reality is, especially as you have a large workforce, getting people who are siloed from a data perspective, siloed from a knowledge perspective, siloed from a decision-making perspective, siloed from an incentive perspective, it's really, really hard. Even if, you have the perfect simulation, the perfect regression algorithm that tells you exactly what to do, it's really, really hard to get everybody kind of stroking on a canoe in the same direction. And so I think if we are able to essentially automate some of this operator work, and we have that simulation, that digital twin, and that kind of optimization algorithms that are going to play that are outside of LLMs, and we kind of mirror them together, not only are you going to make your labor more efficient and people are going to be able to do more with less, but also you can kind of have this centralized like beehive, anthive node of knowledge that can make things much, much, much more efficient. And so I think that is the biggest unlock that's going to be happening. And so when you think about labor efficiency, that's like step one, but optimizing after that is really where it becomes very lucrative.
So you guys are building agents in these new startup companies all the time. How should we think about agents in the broader kind of org design context? Are they augmenting humans, replacing roles, or are they creating entirely new functions that we haven't seen before?
I think that the answer is all the above. But if we think about like the organization design and really kind of the knowledge base of what's going on with these companies, so you have your generalized models, right, with OpenAIs and Gemini and Anthropic and et cetera, et cetera. But one of the unlocks, it's kind of fun for me to always think about big industrial shifts or big, industrial revolution and various different things. It's like, yes, there's jobs that are going away, but what are the new jobs that are kind of coming out? And one of the things that I've been really noticing is, working with these companies, you have these employees who've been here 25 years and they know the knowledge that they have and the insights that they have on how things work operationally is just like, you can't really teach that to somebody new. And there's this big thing in the maintenance world right now, actually, of like the aging out of the workforce. It's really hard, right? Because you have these guys who've been turning wrenches for years who just have all these little things that none of the younger guys know. And so there's a big concern that once that age force is kind of aged out, once the workforce is aged out, what's going to happen with all that knowledge? So I think one of the interesting kind of new positions that is going to be coming out, and it's like, if I was an operator, this is where I would be like, okay, this is going to be my, my semi-retirement, is essentially just being the kind of teacher to the agents. And, so I know I didn't fully answer your question on where, how that's changing, but I think that one interesting point is like, if back to your prompt, like, prompt engineering and kind of the teachings of it, but it's like, how can I brain dump to a computer and then use that and teach and, verify and kind of get that cycle going. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for a lot of people in that space.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So Henry, maybe one more question for you. As you look across the various startups, these agentic based startups that you guys have launched, what cultural or process changes have you seen companies make that have contributed to the success of those agentic systems?
Yeah, so probably three things. So the first one that I actually thought was the most interesting as a product person is just around adoption. It's the first time that I've seen in my career where, as software people, like we know, okay, first release is never good. And if I think Paul Graham or somebody said, like, if you're comfortable with your launch, then you launch too late. And there's various other things. And with SaaS, in my experience, like, users never felt that way. Right. If you say, hey, we just released this new feature, this new product or whatever it is, and there's bugs and everything, and then people are angry and like, well, you promised to do this, but it actually does this. What I think is really interesting that I've been seeing in the market and with the folks that we're working with is there's this desire and kind of just like intrinsic knowledge about AI due to media or whatever it is, or people using it, that it's getting better over time. And so it's the first time that I've released a product or released a feature, an MVP or whatever it is, where our users who are not, using all the latest and greatest AI agentic software day to day are like, hey, this is great. And I know it's getting better. Like, there's all these bugs, but I want to help the AI learn, right? What's going on. And so I think, having that kind of outlook on the software, if companies can continue having that, I think the adoption and the efficiency gains that are going to happen are just going to be huge, because people are willing and wanting to teach and have the like foresight that it's going to get better and better and better over time. So I think that's one thing that I've seen and I hope to continue to see. The second one is really around just the data access. Back to kind of SaaS's all quasi data and whatnot. Like there's been a lot of work on kind of efficiency of integrations and having your data lake and being able, your data warehouse and your business analytics tools and everything. But one of the things that I've noticed with these major companies is like, okay, you've got your data warehouse, you've got all your data there, but nobody knows what it means, where it is, how to query it, et cetera, et cetera. And so we talk a lot about what we call the semantic layer. And I think, enabling your infrastructure, your software, and once again, less, I like to think I'm somewhat technical, but there's people way more technical than I am. But essentially, adding the information and the metadata to all of your columns and rows and all of the various different phrases that you might have in this structured data or even this unstructured data. If your organization can start doing that, it's like by far going to be the biggest unlock moving forward. So, you got this cool new sexy AI company that, gives you a great demo and like, we just need access to your data. You give them access to your data, but you have so much, historical context of what that data actually means in the grand scheme of things that the AI just won't be able to, LMs won't really know how to access it, when to access it, or how to or why to access it. And so I think this semantic layer and building up kind of this knowledge base that sits on top of the data And having infrastructure to do that is the most important thing for companies to be working on right now.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Henry, it's been a real privilege talking to you, and you know, you're an interesting guy, and you're at a very interesting company that has a very unique approach to the market and the way you guys are launching these startups and using agentic automation at the core of that to enable these new companies. So really enjoyed chatting with you. Thanks for being on, and I wish you and UP.Labs the very best.
Absolutely, Brad. Thanks for having me.